All right, we've got a lot to cover, so we're going to go ahead and get started here. I am going to kind of record this here, so get our recording going, and oh, it's actually already going, so we're good to go. So welcome everybody. Very excited to chat here today. We're having a conversation about, shocking AI. But we've been doing a number of these kind of masterclass. So we do a masterclass series kind of twice a month, and the topics come from like what we're hearing from customers, what we're hearing in the market, things like that. We've been doing a series here for the last couple of masterclass, specifically around the last one we did was around AI powered playbook. Today is sales powered. The next one we're going to do is CS powered. So it's all about thinking about like where and how we're kind of leveraging AI in the sales motion today. What's very cool here today is I'll introduce our guest. So Bo is actually a good friend of mine, but he's actually one of the more thoughtful sales leaders I know. He's the VP of Sales, SVP of Sales over at RevOps. What's cool is I was actually at a conference here with Bo a couple of months ago, and he's presenting, and he got up and was talking about some of the AI work he's doing with his sales team. And what was cool about it is like not only the stuff that he's doing, but the stuff that didn't work. Stuff's like, oh, okay, this is actually not helping our reps, it's making them smart. Like, so I thought it'd be a great conversation here today to kind of get his perspective on like where he's seeing kind of the efficiency gains, all that type of good stuff. So Bo, I know I did a poor job of kind of giving an intro. You want to kind of give us a little bit about your background and also kind of like, a little fun fact about who you are.
Sure. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Bo Brooks. I'm based in Denver. I'm actually coming to you from Florida today. Our headquarters at Redvine's in Florida. Redvine is a full-service accounting platform for property managers. Think trust accounting. My background is generally building sales and CS teams in horizontal SaaS. Redvine is very much vertical SaaS, so I'm getting exposure to a different side of the industry, but that's my background. Anywhere from small early stage team, the earliest I've ever started is 3 million to 10 million, up to the company FormStack, when I was last at, was 13 to 70 million. So different growth trajectories in my background.
Cool. So definition of success here today for today's call is we're going to talk a little bit about kind of like our philosophy on kind of like how to step into AI, because there's a very kind of like structured way that, we're recommending to a lot of clients here today. And then we're going to dive into like specific things with Bo about what's working, what's not working, where and how do we need to be thoughtful about not making reps dumber. And we're actually going to go through like specific use cases. Like our goal in all of these kind of masterclass series is hopefully you can take 1 or 2 or 3 tactical things away. We like to joke here internally, like, we hate to be those types of consultants who just talk at a high level of like, go find a unicorn and then never tell you how to find the unicorn. So like, hopefully we can get into some tactical stuff. Very much like it if you got questions along the way, ask questions. Like, much rather this be kind of like a conversation. We will save some Q&A at the end, but like, got something, toss in the chat, raise your hand. Like, let's have a conversation. Let's dive into like what you're working on, so on and so forth. So we're going to quickly blast through this kind of framework of how we're thinking about stepping into AI. And then, we're going to start to chat with, Bo about some of the things he's doing. So our perspective here at Domestique is we think there's 4 steps of kind of how to step into AI. The first is having a clear understanding and documentation around your go-to-market framework. And so what we mean by this is the foundation that everything from an AI perspective will sit on, right? Having clear understanding, like, who's your ICP? Do you have stage advancement criteria, life cycle stages? Is your data relatively clean? Are your systems connected together? The whole point behind this is like, if you don't have this done well, it's essentially going to just be garbage in, garbage out, right? Like we see too often times people are immediately jumping to step 4 of like, hey, just bought Claude. We're going to just go build a bunch of different agents, but they have a bunch of garbage data. So like the stuff they're getting out of their AI is actually not that successful. Step 2 is about then taking that kind of understanding and mapping both an external and internal version of your customer journey. So what I mean by that is like, hey, here's all the steps the customer is going through. And then what are we doing internally at each of the steps? And the more specific you can be internally on each of the steps, the better it'll be when you actually go to start to think about automations, AI-ifying things, so on and so forth. So an example would be, hey, you're scheduling a first call with a prospect. What are all the steps you want the AE to go through? You want them to understand, are they in your ICP? What do they want to understand about the customer? What personas? All that type of stuff. The third is a prioritization of then that kind of customer journey. Hey, we look at it typically in an LOI, LOE, level of effort, level of impact, right? What are the different use cases that will have a big impact across your go-to-market, and what's the level of effort? Should you be automating everything? We're not believers in you should just AI-ify everything, partially a cost standpoint, because you can do some of this via workflows, as well as are you making reps smarter or dumber, right? Finally is the implementation of it. All right, we're going to go and start to automate, AI-ify different use cases along this. Bo, I know you've seen this before. I know you've talked about something similar. What's your thoughts of this at a high level?
Very much so. I've seen a lot in our organization. Everybody's trying to find places to put AI in, and it creates quite a bit of disorganization if you don't have an approach similar to this of how you're going to evaluate where to put it. We see conflict on different parts of the organization doing the same thing but not talking to each other, and we end up with this Frankenstein version of a product. A simple example is having a weekly run where Claude will go into the market, into your industry, and look for insights of what's going on, what your competitors have announced. Everybody was working on this, and so we came back with 4 different versions, one from sales, marketing, CS, and then the product team. And nobody ended up using any of them because nobody knew which one to use. So creating a framework like this, where this AI council one, I think is incredibly important, where somebody almost plays traffic cop a bit. You don't want to discourage people to do it, but you want to make sure you're organized. And then the elements of deciding what we should work on. If nobody's watching that, you're going to end up with a lot of slop, which everybody's probably seen already.
I think the point you're making is we're seeing so many AI implementations fail to the point you're making because no one is being aligned about there's a lot of goodness there, but no one's saying, all right, let's just merge Johnny and Susie's, discovery skill or, that type of stuff. So, and by the way, just for everybody here, we'll share all the slides at the end of this. So if you have any questions, happy to kind of jump in and kind of walk through this. So, all right. On the go-to-market framework, there's a handful of basic things you can do super easy to kind of set this up. What this is this is an understanding of what should you measure to begin with. A lot of organizations we work with don't have a clear understanding of what are we measuring? What are we looking at not only at the board level, but what are you looking at sales level if you're Bo, or on the marketing level, or on the CS level? Just having a clear understanding of that. And then once you have an understanding of that, a basic data glossary. I know this sounds very basic. You'd be shocked at how many organizations we work with who you go and ask hey, tell me your definition of an MQL. There's 32 different definitions, right? So what are all the kind of things you're measuring? What are the definitions? Who cares about them? And then what are going to be the systems of record? Bo, I'm curious, what are you guys doing at, RevOps in terms of from a data standpoint to make sure that foundation that you're layering AI on top of is relatively clean so that the results you're getting out are trustworthy?
Yeah, our approach has been setting what metric are we going to impact with the AI initiative that we're putting forward. I think we'll get into some of the examples, but if it's a pipe gen measure, are we measuring number of MQLs created versus number of new deals created? And then if we're doing some account executive workflow exercise, are we expecting to see stage 2 to 3 conversion rate improve, stage 2 to 1 improve, and very clearly setting what's the benchmark that we're measuring and what's the expected impact we want to see to measure this as a success. That gets skipped a lot because everybody's so excited about AI, they forget to focus in on what they're going to measure when they put these things in.
I love that. Absolutely. We just got a great question. Chip, love the questions. Hysterical. Great to see you, sir. Bo, I think this is a great AI council, but I'm curious to get your thoughts on this. So Chip asks essentially, what benchmarks, guardrails do I need to create to avoid super spend / wasteful spend and avoid token sinkhole hell so my CFO doesn't execute me?
Man, this is a tough question. I don't know that we've solved it either. I'll go back to the AI council. So at RevOps, what we ended up doing, our head of sales enablement, head of revenue enablement, has been designated as the choke point for all the different projects that people are working on. It's not his job to tell people, no, you shouldn't do this, but it's his job to collect the use cases and then try and avoid people working on the same thing, which is going to use up our Claude tokens and start to get questions. We've already had the CFO coming back asking to eliminate people who have Claude licenses but aren't using it. So putting him in place has helped at least to measure. I don't know if anybody is a Gong user as well, but he was the same person. Gong just moved to a credits-based system for some of their AI work. He is the controller of that as well, and going into Gong and making sure, do we have things running that we're not actually using, and working with the people that set them up to retire things that don't matter. So I prefer the one neck to choke model, at least on the go-to-market side. I don't want to have any responsibility of that over the engineers because their token usage is crazy. But on our side, that one neck to choke, that we're staying within the boundaries.
And to double click, I 100% agree with Bo's saying of like, you're seeing more and more, like Gong, HubSpot's now slowly moving, and more systems moving to this kind of token base, and being able to like have one central place that can kind of keep track of all of that. And that's where I think this is one of the mandates of this AI council. And what's very important, I alluded to this earlier, is like, I would not just AI-ify, right? Every workflow you identify in your customer journey. There are plenty of things you can do via just like a basic workflow automation that exists in some of the natural tech stack today that doesn't need AI, right? I think we're seeing a lot of organizations just like, oh, we can do all this type of stuff. But there's a lot of great functionality that already exists in software today. And again, that's where you can start to think about, all right, we're going to leverage AI over here for the token. Bo, I think you had a great point of like, hey, what are we looking at that we're not using that we can kind of turn off and stuff like that to manage that token usage as well. So, all right, we're going to jump back to Chip. Hopefully that answered your question. If it didn't, let us know. I'm kind of happy to double click on it. So jumping back.
Maybe one more thing I'll add, Reese, that we've been doing recently is stop celebrating people when they achieve hitting their token limit in Claude on the day. I've enforced this across the team that I want nobody reporting on that and trying to be the first person in Slack each day to say they hit their token limit. It's not constructive. So I don't know if anybody else is running into that, but we've enforced like you can't celebrate this any longer.
I actually hadn't heard of that, but like makes total sense. Like, yeah, because it's just setting the wrong behavior. All right, customer journey, step 2, right? We kind of like built the foundation, make sure our strategy, our process, our systems, and our data are quality, put AI on top of. Step 2 is like, let's document both the external and the internal steps. What does that look like? This doesn't have to be this overly long, complicated process. We've done it here internally at Domestique. It took us like a handful of hours. We do it with a lot of customers. When you think about it, so here's an example of what we did. Like you take different steps. And what we did is said, what is the customer going through? And then what are all the things we want to do internally? So this is an example of like all the different steps we want in the onboarding phase. And then we essentially sit down and say, all right, how are we automating? What does that look like? In addition, there are certain key things, and a lot of organizations, you'd be shocked that don't do this, like making sure they've defined their life cycle stages, their stage advancement criteria. That's oftentimes that kind of external, what is the customer going through, and making sure that that is set up in your system. Bo, you and the RevOps team, like what have you done from an external standpoint? Have you done life cycle? Have you done stage advancement? What have you done on the internal standpoint to understand, hey, when a rep jumps on a first phone call, I want them to do A, B, C, D, and E?
I think we've done exactly what you're saying. It's a version of this, but it's blown out even farther. The sides that the sales team owns, effectively from FQL forward, we have subdivided into deeper categories, and we put stage criteria in place that's buyer driven. I might be preaching to the choir here, but it's buyer driven. So we want to see a specific action of something that a customer says before we move it to the next stage. That's just general good pipeline building hygiene. But at the same time, if we know what those criteria are, we can use AI to help guide reps to keep deals in the right stage. So now a part of our process is to pull transcripts from calls, run that through an LLM that has our stage criteria, and it can identify deals that are in the wrong stage. For a variety, it could be too far ahead because the account executive has decided something's happened that hasn't, or it's not far along because sales reps are superstitious and they don't want to move things forward. So by having this stuff clearly defined, and then I'd say on the pre-sale side, this has been a partnership with the marketing side of them deciding how do we want to measure and tag things. Lead scoring is a good example. Like that's been very programmatic and things like HubSpot and Salesforce in the past. You can now get even more aggressive with it and use LLMs to drive certain behavior. So I don't know if that's what you're looking for, Reese, but we've spent a lot of time defining it so that then we can actually leverage the AI on top of the sellers to it creates a better forecast. It creates more accurate pipelining. It helps everybody.
And I think you're highlighting exactly the point that I think we're trying to hit home on of like, everybody's just jumping to like, they haven't done the pre-work. They're just jumping to, hey, let's build LLMs to like evaluate our pipeline. Well, if we have different, definitions of the pipeline, the LLM is going to be all over the place. Like, and so you got that garbage in, garbage out function. Also, you all have done a very detailed job in understanding what you're trying to do internally. So you can say like, all right, where and how can we set the, AI come in and help out the reps in doing, pre-call research or things like that. So mapping the customer journey, if you all haven't done that, both externally and internally, go ahead and do it. It's super easy. It's not hard. You don't need to make it complicated. So, all right, step 3. I know we've kind of alluded to this now several times here. You got to prioritize the use cases. And this is where like AI council comes into place. So like AI council, designate like key team members across different organizations, pull in like non-executives. Like I think, pulling that BDR, the AE is like super AI forward, right? But it should be a handful of individuals and their mandate is to understand, to prioritize what use cases they're going to work on, actually designate who's going to work on it, and then effectively roll it out, right? And what you're seeing here, this is an example of how to prioritize. This is like a basic scorecard. We use an LOI, LOE here of like level of effort, level of impact. It's a high, medium, low, and it's super easy to understand, identify like, high level of impact, low level of effort. Those are probably use cases you should probably do. And then the question should be, to Chip's original question, is this an AI thing that we're doing, or can we just build a simple workflow to avoid the kind of token usage? Bo, like internally at RevOps, what are you doing? Like do you have an AI council? Do you have a version of it? What does it look like and how successful has it been?
We're having this conversation because people have started to try and do so many things, but in disparate areas, it's not organized. I'd say on the sales side, we've got 4 sales leaders who are very interested and doing a lot of testing and trying different processes. And what has helped, like the AI council version of that is it's on our staff meeting every single week. What are the AI initiatives that are making progress and making sure we're not duplicating efforts? And then we're also leveraging these things as a team. Like an example I can give you is we had the new hire trainer complaining that it was very hard to get practice done with the new hires because we didn't have enough people who could jump on and role play. So we heard that on the meeting. The sales enablement person went and built an AI role play agent inside of ChatGPT that he then tested with the sales leaders. We got it to be very strong, and then the adoption inside of the new hires was incredible. They got to practice a lot more than they had in the past, but it was because that problem was brought up in the sales leader staff meeting, and then somebody ran with it, built something, brought it back around. So that council function. Now we're trying to figure out as a company, how do we broaden that out? Like a downfall example, and sorry if there's any marketers. Marketing went and decided they want to build a digital asset program for us. We're not going to go buy MindTickle or something like that, where we could warehouse all of the content that we have to send out to customers. They built something, an artifact in Claude that we could essentially use, but they didn't bring the sales team into the conversation. So they built something beautiful that has everything. It's toggleable and filterable, but it's in a place where the sales team's like, it's out of their workflow. They're not going to use it. And now we've got this orphan tool that nobody really is taking advantage, or we're trying to figure out how do we get them to take advantage of it.
And I think that point that you just made there, Bo, is like a very interesting point, right? Like I think one of the classic things we saw in the mid, 20 teens, right? Particularly when like VC money was cheap and stuff like that, is there were all these companies running around that are just buying software left and right for any and all kind of like use cases. And then the software would be poorly implemented, poorly rolled out, limited use. And we're seeing now the kind of the same issues with AI of like, hey, look, we built this in a silo, didn't really talk to whether it's other departments, other people, tried to roll it out. One person may be using it, but no one else is, and it's not then driving the efficiency gains. And oh, by the way, on the flip side, some people may still be using it and there still may be token usage and costs associated with it, and you're not then getting the efficiencies associated with it. So
Exactly.
all right, we got another question, Chip. Love the questions. Keep them coming. Are domestic AI tools solutions for clients proprietary or built in-house on an LLM? Which one, or do you have customized for LLM for each client directly? Great question. So this gets into a couple of things. So what we do here at Domestic, just so everybody knows, is our team has access to kind of the three major LLMs, Claude Chat, Gemini. And we tend to work with clients across all of those. And that's talking about LLMs from kind of like a non-native stuff. In addition, there's a whole bunch of tools that are now rolling out AI functionality. HubSpot now has prospecting agent, data agent, Salesforce, so on and so, Gong, and so on and so forth. We're also working on that as well. So we then tend to work with clients, whether it's in kind of building AI automation or augmentation and the kind of non-native tools like a Claude Chat or Gemini, or we're working with them in kind of like, hey, let's build agents internally within the existing kind of like tech stack that they have today. This is actually a topic that Bo and I, we're going to get to. So I'm curious, Bo, like the question for you, and I know this is kind of jumping ahead a little bit. So like one of the kind of like larger questions in the industry right now is like, thinking about your tech stack of like, are you trying to build your tech stack where you have a bunch of agents kind of in the existing tech you have today? Hey, we got the HubSpot prospecting agent, we got the Salesforce agent, stuff like that. Or are you trying to build this kind of like universal spine or mission control tower and leveraging like a Claude or something like that? What's your opinion? How are you all addressing that at kind of RevOps, and like what do you see as the pros and cons to either approach?
The long-term vision is the later option because that's more transferable across all the different departments, and you've got this one brain of all the data you may want to pull from or processes and sub-agents that can control it. Today, in reality, we have some custom-built stuff, and then we have some stuff that comes out of our current tech stack. We do our best to stitch it all together, but in reality, not a lot of it, other than like through an MCP into HubSpot or something like that, is not necessarily stitched together. So I think this vision is still evolving because we're figuring out how we want all these things to work. I'd say philosophically, at least my philosophy around this stuff is I want to build AI products and tools for the sales team that fit into their workflow, that doesn't necessarily modify their workflow. That's where, and I don't know if we want to go there now, but that's where we've run into trouble in the past of trying to change their workflow with a new tool that disrupts how we've always done things. And it just creates more work or more abandonment by the team, which is super frustrating.
So let's jump into that now, right? Like, so we've kind of like teed up the framework, right? We said, hey, let's get the foundation correct. Let's map the customer journey, external, internal, and then let's prioritize this. Now it's kind of like, all right, we've got all these use cases and we can go build AI, automation, workflows across all this. Expand on that point you were just making, right? Like, what do you mean by that? Because we're seeing lots of organizations where you'll have a sales leader go in and say, hey, we're going to AI-ify everything, right? But what you're saying is trying to be more strategic about it. Why is that? And what's kind of the benefits or negatives behind that?
Sure, I'll give you a couple. Well, I can give a few examples. One of the negative examples, and I think we probably all know it, there's a lot of virtue signaling on LinkedIn and on webinars like this, where how everything is so great. I think a lot of people are not being honest. Yeah. One of the things that we decided to do at RevOps was to populate the CRM based on transcript data out of calls, so the reps don't have to take the manual time anymore to go fill in all the appropriate information and keep CRM hygiene up. Great in principle. We built it. We used LLMs. It was all automated. It would run out of Gong call transcripts, and it was flawless. We'd get a Slack message as well when it was done, so we saw that this got updated. And after about a month and a half, the sales directors came back and said, we need to turn this off. The sales reps don't know enough about their deals because they're not having to take the action of recording notes. I mean, you can see this on social media. Cognition experts will tell you, you do a thing, then you come back to it and you think about that thing in order to ingest the information. that's human nature and human behavior that we think is we're just going to be able to disrupt by doing all this stuff. And because the reps weren't having to go and record their information, they were just getting dumber about their deals, and it was blowing up our sales process. So we actually stopped it. Like, it still runs, but we hid the fields from the sellers in HubSpot, and we reintroduced fields that they had to go and record in order to move deals forward in the sales process. And we were honest with the team, like, we're doing this because you guys don't know your deals. And that's super disruptive to our process. Like, it was quite frustrating because we thought this was going to be this great unlock. And it's funny, like, you hear these different things that AI is going to come in and replace a lot of the work that we do, and we're going to have all this free time, right? It's going to create this like permanent vacation or whatever. But at the same time, we expect all this to happen, and then the reps to get more done in their workflow because we're taking some of the lift off of them. I think from a human cognition perspective, the sellers are not ready for that either. So when we think about AI-ifying things, we want to do it in a way that's going to be in their flow and additive to their flow. So that's the example of what we removed. The other side of that is most people have done this. We built automation and visualization of pre-call research, pre-call 1, pre-call 2, where it would before pre-call 1, the AI would go out, do all the research on the company, the contact, the industry, and then put that right into the deal inside of HubSpot so the seller could see that information before the call. Guess what happened? They weren't looking at it. And they weren't taking the step to review it with the SE before the call. So in order to be successful, what we had to do was create a mandatory meeting that needed to take place between the account executive and the sales engineer, with their manager added to the meeting as optional. And only then did they actually go in and start to review the pre-call research. We also cut it down because originally it was like 12 pages long and nobody can internalize that amount of information. So we cut it down to 3 or 4 pages. And what ended up happening was our conversion rate. So we did this before the first call, and we did this before the second call. The AI, we call it Deal OS, Deal Operating System. What we saw was our win rate went from 36% to 45% over the course of this quarter. It's happened since the end of February until now, because we saw they're showing up to deals more prepared, and because we enforced a rule where they have to have that meeting before the call. There was that catch point to make it work. So initially the AI was not additive, but once we enforced the review process, all of a sudden it was incredibly successful.
So what I'm hearing for you is kind of two things. As again, thinking back to this kind of AI council, I think where this is very valuable is, like, first, it's identifying the use cases where there's material time savings, right? And the example you were giving was the pre-call research. And in relation, the second thing being, hey, we need to make sure that we're not taking the critical thinking away from the reps within the deal. So if this is time saving, how do we make sure that reps are still internalizing this, right? And I think you hammered home on a couple things, right? You instituted a manual process where they had to go talk with the SC, and you also shortened the information, because I've seen the exact same thing of, hey, here's pre-call research, here's 32 pages to go and read, and like, no one's gonna read that shit. Like, so like that type of stuff, like, how are you taking those two principles and thinking about other use cases inside of the kind of sales process today?
I wish I had a good framework answer for you. I think generally the genesis of these projects start with identifying a manual process that the team is consistently doing. They're not usually complaining about, but we know there's a way to do it. So another example, the SDRs, we have about 6 outbound BDRs that are doing a general cold sequence. They would spend about 40% of their time doing website research to make sure that a customer was ICP before they would start the outreach. And that was incredible. I mean, I came into the company and saw this and was incredibly frustrated, because that's a lot of wasted time. So we went and built an agent to do that work for them. Like, this is great. Like, they'll get that 40% time back. They can effectively double their work. We did all that work. The agent then marked it as ICP in HubSpot, and then that would initiate them to be able to put it into a sequence. What we found was they still went and looked at the websites, even though it had been marked ICP. So maybe they saved 5% of the time. So then what we realized is, okay, we have to take away the option for them to have any control in this process. And we need to just go automatically mark these as ICP and put them in the system. Only then did their output go up. It went up like 2.5x. because we removed the option for them to do it. They didn't like it. We had to kind of do some damage control with them because they felt like they were losing control, but it worked. Our output went up 2.5x. Then what Reese has just pulled up. So then we went to the next step, which is they spent a lot of time on email, particularly personalization. We had personalization in place in HubSpot, but they were still spending time looking and trying to modify the emails before they went out. And what we found was Claude, like AI can write these emails better than they could. It could do deeper research. So this is a custom tool. And this gets into probably a bit more philosophical than everybody wants to do right now. But many of you have probably worked with Outreach or SalesLoft or HubSpot or whatever to run your sequence automation. They've built great piping for a sequence to work, but they're not trained on our value proposition, and they don't understand what our customers' differentiations or our competitors' differentiations are. So we went and built basically an LLM that knew that information. This is a bigger task that we took on, but we effectively rebuilt Outreach. But the engine was, it knows Rentvine and it knows all of our competitors. So what you're seeing is we took away the responsibility from the BDRs to do anything with email. They don't even touch the email. They just see in HubSpot that an email was sent to their prospects on their behalf. The tool that we built is still a sequence tool, and it follows the normal sequence that everybody is used to. But the thing I don't like about that is, other than personalization tokens, all the emails look the same to every single customer, regardless of. And so if I wanted to do differentiation across the different competitors, I'd have to write 5 different emails across 5 different competitors. You get 25 iterations of an email in a sequence. It doesn't really work. So this tool that we built here is a normal sequence, but when it hits an email step, and the AI agent is initiated to go do the research. On the left, it's Timothy Gilmartin. It'll go look at him. It'll go look at his company. It'll go identify what tools they have listed on their website that we're going to compete with today when we go outbound. And then so what you're seeing here is 2 different customers in the sequence at the same email step in that sequence, completely different emails. They don't even look close. And in green, it tags the elements that it pulls in, but the body of the email is customized based on what we know about that customer, which has been another unlock for the SDRs, where these emails are not only better, but we can do more of them and they're delivered. We do still have an approval step that the leadership does each day. There's somebody else that looks at these to make sure the AI doesn't hallucinate, but we've trained the AI over the last few months to make these emails even better, but the BDRs don't send them anymore. So disruptive step.
So just to double click on that, you still do have a manual approval, like you're still including the critical thinking within that, but you've now pushed that up to the managers and removed that from the BDRs. Is that correct?
Correct. It sounds like a lot, but generally we've trained the AI to where the approval process is incredibly fast today. When we first started, there was some elements that we had to train it on, but it has learned and now it knows. And then the other beauty of this is it will, when a call step comes up, it will send effectively 2 options of a script to the BDR that's personalized for that outbound call to that customer. When it hits a LinkedIn step, it will send them the language to drop into a connection request that's personalized based on that customer. So unfortunately, we've taken a lot of the decision-making and empowerment out of the BDR's hands, but the messaging is stronger. The metric that we were wanting to watch to see if this was effective was stage 1 to stage 2 deals increasing. So the 2 metrics, the number of deals created and the number of deals that are qualified moving to stage 2. And the results have been wild. The numbers have gone up incredibly. From the beginning of March to now, our pipeline has doubled, both in the number of deals and then we measure on the number of houses under management. And then, as I mentioned, the win rate has gone up from 35 to 46, 44%, something like that, over that same period. So it's these different elements that we've put measurement against and are constantly watching. There's been lots of attribution conversations with marketing about what's driving what between sales and marketing. But in the grand scheme of things, we have the same targets. So it's pushing the results where we want to see them.
Love this. We got a question, Chip, great question about kind of email deliverability. I've got some thoughts and opinions on it, but like, Bo, like, what are you doing on email deliverability?
Yep, we worked with some specialists to help us on this. So we are using a custom domain, and I'm glad you brought this up because it's another talking point, but we do use a custom domain. Our normal domain is rentvine.com. We send all this outbound from tryrentvine.com. We've had some help warming up these IPs to make sure they get good deliverability. Our open rate on HubSpot from the original sequences before we had this was about 33 to 35%. We're seeing regularly 39 to 42% open rates. So the open rates are actually better, but that's because we went through the process of warming. The incredible thing to me is we're actually seeing lower response rates and lower click rates on the emails that come from this group, because people have been trained. When I get an email from something like Try Rentvine, I don't trust it, so I'm going to go look at it, but they don't go plug into Chrome, tryrentvine.com. They go directly to rentvine.com, and then they book a demo through our standard process. So we've had to do work to match up. These people are coming in direct. This was all triggered because in a bunch of marketing meetings, the marketing team would throw out statements like, our direct channel is way up over the last 3 months. We don't exactly know why, but it's great that it's up. And we dug in and figured out this is what's driving a lot of the traffic change. So we wanted to make sure the BDRs got credit for that work, which took some attribution gymnastics to make work right. But it was super powerful. A bit discouraging early because we didn't see people replying to this outreach, even though the personalization was incredible. But we figured out why. It's because they were going direct to the website.
But what's interesting around that, right? Like that starts to get an attribution problem, but you're still solving the problem of like, you're generating pipeline at the end of the day. Like now you want to understand what's working, what's not working, so you can understand where to invest. But like at the end of the day, number one thing is like, are we doing the activities to generate pipeline? And then, all right, what's working, what's not working, so we can double down on it.
Exactly.
Cool. Well, I know you got some other use cases to kind of walk us through. You want to kind of walk through some of the insights you've seen on some of these kind of other use cases on the sales side?
Yeah, this is an example. I didn't put the video in here, but some of the best ideas that we've come up with for go-to-market AI use cases has just been like groups of people that we've gotten together and talked about the ideas. So this was one that was generated from a friend of mine at a different company doing something totally different. So it's a pool cleaning company, and they had the idea to use public data to find people who had pulled permits to build pools, and they would initiate AI outreach that way. So that triggered an idea with us. So I can actually share the video and show it if you want, Reese. But
yeah.
What we've designed is an AI agent will go to a customer of ours website and think this is where you would go to find a house to rent. Go to their website. It would pull down 3 addresses that they've got listed for rent. It would drop those addresses into a pricing calculator that recommends what the rent price should be. Then it takes the agent takes that information and compares it to what they've listed the property at and looks for mismatches in prices. Then it records a script. We have, if you're familiar with 11 Labs, we have all of the BDRs and AEs voices trained on 11 Labs. And then, so their voice will record a script and a voiceover of this PDF that we then email to the customer in the sequence saying, hey, we think we have some opportunities for you to charge more of these properties where you may have them mispriced in the listing. And it is incredibly disruptive to the customer when they see this and they're like, holy cow, how did you get this information? If the BDR had to build these things to include in a sequence, it would take about a half an hour. But by building this with an AI agent, they're done effectively instantaneously to the rep's view. It probably takes a couple of minutes, but it's just a step where we've been able to leverage AI to create more opportunity and pattern interrupt in our outreach to the customer. And let me see if I can pull one up really quick so you can see an idea of what it. Let's see. Let me just share screen here.
Yep. Love to see. But the idea that you're kind of bringing up here, Bo, is again, like the concept we keep talking about is like, what are the time-consuming use cases that the internal team is working on? Where and how can we leverage this? We want to maintain those steps of like critical thinking within the process, and how can we start to kind of think about it? So yeah, walk us through this.
Don't judge the number of tabs I have open. Hopefully you're with me on some of this. But so you can see like subject line, I looked at your Lee's Summit, Missouri portfolio, and then the body of the email. And it's got this thumbnail in there that we deliver. I'm hoping, can you hear this? Can you hear the audio?
No, can't hear it. It's probably because you just
Of course. Yeah. Let me switch and share the audio. I apologize. This is a rookie mistake.
It's all good.
Share the audio right here. Okay, so this is an actual rep. This is Maya on our team.
I pulled a portfolio rent analysis for Kingdom Capital Property Management in Lee Summit, Missouri, using live comparable rental data. Quick takeaway: the sample listings we analyzed are consistently priced below current market signals. For the subject property, I started with 3837 New Colonial Drive, Lee Summit, Missouri, 64064. That's the anchor point for the comps panel. First up is New Colonial. It's listed at $1,325, while similar units are closer to $1,750. That's about
So
420.
I won't play the whole thing for you, but you can. That's Maya. When Maya calls them, they're going to hear the same voice that they heard on the video, and those are created instantaneously. So that's an example of something we recognize we could do with AI that we would never be able to do with a human in the process.
And the way that you specifically did that, like what are you like? Is Claude going out, scraping that, then tossing it into 11 Labs, and then that's then plugging it into Rebar? Like, is that kind of the
Correct.
like? Okay, but like
Exactly.
what you've essentially done is you've kind of leveraged using kind of Claude to kind of connect these different kind of tools. It's going out pulling the information. 11 Labs is being able to kind of, but you connect that together, and then is that the first email in your sequence or the second? Like that seems
no,
like
this ends up being like email 5. And we can vary a bit, but on our standard cold sequence, it's about email 5. So when that step hits in the sequence, that's what fires the action for Claude to go to the website and pull down addresses that we want to run through the process.
This is like the cool part, like where we're at today. You and I were talking about this as we were prepping this, like just hearing all the different use cases. Like this is some of the coolest times of like being go to market. So like this is awesome. All right, walk us through this use case.
So this is just an example of what we did for the pre-call planning and what we can see in the information that's available. Some of this stuff gets so detailed. I think this is actually from a different one, but some of this gets so detailed. The craziest story that I tell is it returned information about a prospect that said, we found a public record that this prospect got divorced 3 months ago. So be careful in your language that you're not using too disruptive of language. And the BDR manager slacked this to me, and I said, oh no, it didn't use it in the email. And he said, yeah, it said, does your ex-wife remind you of your property management software? And then he said, just kidding. I freaked out. I thought it was real, but it didn't actually do it. But that's the level of information we're able to get, and that gets put into HubSpot so the team can see it. You can tell like the challenge we had was the AEs weren't looking at this information before they were making calls. So we put that required meeting in place before they could do it, because the information is so rich when it's coming back. We had to enforce the actual usage.
And what tool are you leveraging to go do this? Is this just Claude going out and doing this?
The same, yep.
All right, this Claude. And what were I can see it right here, but like, what's the specific information you cared about? Like, obviously you've got an ICP, did you want like, hey, they have X listed on their website? Like, what are the pieces of information you care about?
Go to the next one too. This is what's in Rebar, but it's not as much. So this is what pushes through to HubSpot, so it's in the rep's workflow. Yep. So I want to see the summary of the business. So before the first call that it depends on where it's at in the flow too. Before the first call, we want them to have the background on the company. We want to know what software they're using today. We want to know how big their company is, how long they've been in business. Like we use Claude to take a look at all of the prospect data, and what we found is our win rate is highest on companies that were founded in 2019 or later. So we flagged that in here of founding date, and we've trained the team on what the talk track should be based on if they're before or they're after 2019. So those are a couple of good examples.
So you're not only leveraging Claude to like continually update your ICP, hey, these are other factors that lead to like good accounts, but then you're then driving that into your pre-call research so that you have that kind of information as you're kind of like being able to kind of prep for these calls.
Exactly. Yep.
Love it. All right, walk us through the contact level.
This was just an example of how detailed like the social stuff it can give us. We've been very careful. I don't know if anybody else has dealt with this, but we've been very careful about how we weave this stuff in to our outreach, because we could tell from this owner what they like to do, where they spend their time, what their interests are. that gets pretty creepy. I heard a story yesterday from somebody who their system did not have guardrails on it. And one of their prospects was on vacation in Hawaii, and they got an email while they were in Hawaii mentioning that they were on vacation in Hawaii and he'd love to talk when they got back. And it immediately turned the buyer off. The buyer reported them to the Better Business Bureau, and it was not good. So this is what I had in here is this is the level that we can get to, but we've been very careful about not putting this in.
I'm curious to get your thoughts. So, obviously in the chat, we were talking about kind of like an outbound masterclass we went on, but like the expert we had on for the outbound masterclass, one of the things she was saying is like, she was essentially saying personalization is overrated. It's more about the company's need for the problem. So said another way, hey, the fact that Reese likes to bike, well, like if I'm going to go buy some piece of software, if you open up with an email like, hey, I see you like biking, well, does that relate at all to the piece of software, the problem that I have there with the software? So like, how do you think about personalization, particularly when you're kind of like doing it, and like, how much of it do you think is like impactful versus like, because the point you just brought up about the Hawaii stuff, like there could be more detrimental things than like, again, like whenever I get an email that says, hey, you like to bike, it's like, yeah, but that has no relevance to what we're talking about here. Like, yes, you clearly understood that, but like, I don't care, and it's not going to like allow me to want to buy whatever it is you're selling more just because you understand what my hobbies are.
Yep. Two thoughts behind this. One, we do avoid using like personalization on hobbies or university you went to. But we have trained the AI when we have the personalization on to use it in like idioms or like, let us help you get your business moving as fast as a kite moving through the water off of Melbourne or something like that. Where we're not saying like, hey, you should talk to us because you like to kite surf in Melbourne, but we use it as like an analogy that people are like, oh, that's pretty cool. They must have said that for a reason. The one area where we found you can use it is if it applies to philanthropic or nonprofit efforts that the person cares about. They do like that to be called out. And you can oftentimes see that in the company blog, or you can see that on their personal stuff. If they volunteer at Boys and Girls Club of America, that's definitely something that they're passionate about and you can use, versus like family vacation and having gone to University of Tennessee, that stuff doesn't matter. So that's the one area where we've seen it be more effective because they do like to talk about it.
No, that's great insight. Love that. All right. We got 10 minutes left, and I want to make sure we stop for a couple minutes to ask questions. But like, what other use cases like would you highlight are things you are thinking about working on, and or use cases that just frankly have not fallen well or fallen flat that you guys tried and was just like an epic failure?
Yeah, I'll give you some ones that were kind of on the precipice of. I don't know if anybody else does. Like when you get into the technical portion of a sale, they send you the 250 question thing you got to answer. We are trying to build out an LLM that's trained on the ones we filled out in the past, so that we can just drop those documents in, it'll automatically fill them out, and then we have somebody to review. It's just a bad pain point that nobody likes to do. That's one we're testing. Another one we're testing is contract revisions. One thing that probably a lot of people are seeing is people are taking our contract and dropping it into ChatGPT and asking for questions that they should ask on the contract. So we see a lot of things popping up, and it's popping up in a pattern. So we are trying to train an LLM on all of these questions, how our legal team has answered them, so that when we get these questions back, they don't have to go to the legal team first. They can drop it in the LLM, get an answer, and then just share the answer in Slack to get a thumbs up from the legal team rather than putting the work on. We've tested this early on through just the sales enablement leader owning this, and it's worked. We've been able to resolve questions without having to bring in the legal team. Those are a couple of examples. The big challenge lately is we decided to switch from ChatGPT to Claude, and there's nobody that has built a migration process. I don't think too many people have done it, so we spent a lot of manual work rebuilding. That's not very exciting.
What, like, obviously I mentioned like we work across all three systems. Like, what drove the decision to switch to Claude?
Better for like creating marketing artifacts. that was the broad one. Like for general research, it's just as good as ChatGPT. I don't know if there's massive difference, but it was mostly for creating the artifacts that we need and things like we have a contest going in Q2 where the team earns points based on stage advancement in the sales process. It would have taken me a long time to pull the data and run the math on stage advancement. We just built it in a Cloud artifact, and we're able to host it through Netlify on a site so the team can see it on a HubSpot dashboard in real time. Saved a ton of time and created execution easier. So that's an example of why we moved. I'd say one more thing that I didn't mention that was helpful early on. This was like in February. We were trying to get more adoption of people using AI to do research and ask questions. For a couple of months in a row, I had the engineering team, whoever owned it, or our ChatGPT license at the time, they pulled usage data for me for everybody on the sales team. So I could see the number of chats and interaction that everybody had. And I just put that out to the team. Like it wasn't judgment or anything. Some people were low because they were using Gemini. But we were surprised at some of the high people on there. And people were asking questions like, why are you such like an ace in ChatGPT and using AI? And it was one of our sellers who's from Cuba. He's like, I use this a lot to help me write emails and do research. And he has a really high win rate on the team. So all of a sudden, everybody's like, oh, I don't have to have these complicated use cases. If Levant can do it, I need to get in there and start doing research and helping it write more clever and creative emails. And that drove our adoption much higher, just people using it for the standard everyday thing. It was almost just by knowing how much usage other people had, it drove usage across the team. So if you haven't done that, I'd recommend it. Your team may think you're big brother if you do it, but we got them past that.
Essentially, like you put the scoreboard up and reps are competitive, and no, I think it's brilliant. All right, one use case that you guys tried didn't work, you've fallen flat. I know you've highlighted a couple, like particularly around the transcriptions getting automatically put in the CRM. Anything else you'd be like, hey, avoid that, or think about automation or put in a manual step there?
The only other one that comes to mind that was a huge failure, if anybody uses 6sense, our marketing team uses 6sense, and they now have this AI agent that will outbound email for you, it was a colossal failure. Be very careful if you turn it on. We did not have good guardrails on it, and we had probably, 24 instances where an account executive was emailing back and forth with a customer, and then all of a sudden they got an email that's like, have you ever heard of RentVine before? And they got frustrated, reached out to the reps, and we've been talking. Why are you emailing me about this generic email? Because we weren't coordinated on what the guardrails were on what it would look for or not inside of HubSpot. So AI agents going rogue with these generic emails for customers that we had mid sales process.
And I think this gets back to your larger point, right? Like as you're thinking about like what use cases, as AI counsel is thinking about what use cases to kind of like automate AI-ify, what are then also the guardrails? How do you put in those manual processes to make sure that, you're not getting that? Because like that then, it's not only like you're not getting the efficiencies, but you're actually having the reverse thing. You're having a negative impact on things.
Yep. We're private equity backed. We get a lot of pressure from the private equity to be using AI. So every department in the company has to show what they're doing as far as like leveraging AI in the process. That caused marketing to push this thing out without really putting their heads together with sales to figure this out. So unfortunately, Reese, the answer is not complicated. It just meant sitting down, like sales leaders sitting down with the marketing owner of this to put in what are the filters that we need to use in our sending logic. Right. And we relaunched it this week and it's been fine. But they wanted to launch it quickly so that they could go to a meeting and say, hey, we launched this 6sense AI agent to now deliver emails. We're using AI here. And it blew up in our faces. We ended up not talking about it. And I was like, I dare you guys to talk about this with the board because it will not go well. But we learned.
It gets back to the point of like AI council is just a cross-functional set of leaders trying to kind of figure this out. And like, it's giving people room to get like, this is why you just can't hit the button of like, hey, just AI this and like it takes care of itself. So
exactly.
All right, Bo, this has been awesome. As I mentioned at the top, like not only, are you just a good friend, but like I think you're one of the most thoughtful, forward-looking, sales leaders out there, particularly comes with AI. This has been awesome. Thank you so much. All right, I want to, we got 3-4 minutes left. What thoughts, comments, questions is good? I think everybody is very well aware. Bo's super smart in this area. What questions do you have? Happy to kind of take a couple of questions here before the top of the hour. I'm extraordinarily good at, waiting on calls and, awkward silence. My team knows that very well. So, all right, you've got like one of the best experts here. Like, what? Anybody got one question here? All right.
I have one.
Oh, Alexa, all right, you go.
So if you were talking to someone that's like super early stage, like very small team, but trying to have outsized impact, what would be like your quickest win that you would advise for really small teams to start with?
A couple things come to mind is starting to do an internal like lunch and learn. We're actually trying this at our company too, but different people just take 5 minutes and show something they learned or are doing with AI this week to make it not as scary to share. That's helped a lot for us to learn from each other. Like if you have engineering come show something, it needs to be something where I can learn because I'm not an engineer. And then the other thing I would say is find those couple of people that you can get a beer with or get a coffee with once every couple of weeks and just talk about what you're learning. Like the rebar tool, the sequencer tool that I mentioned, that came out of an idea of getting a beer with a friend and complaining about the BDRs doing too much website research and thinking about like, if this is human work that's happening, like why can't we just have an agent do it? And then we started to dig in and solve it. So I don't know if that's helpful, but that's honestly all that we've done is have conversations about what's working and what we're trying, and then talking to people outside who are willing to share things that they're doing, and then just being willing to test. Like I'm not technical, I'm not an engineer, but I haven't been afraid to get in and start playing around with Claude and doing things. Not revolutionary.
Thank you so much. This has been awesome. Seriously, truly, truly appreciate it. Thank you again. If anybody else is interested, really appreciate everybody's time today. We will have not only a recording, but the slides posted on the website. If you ever have any questions, always happy to jump on a call and chat through things. Thank you again, Bo. I know you're heading to Italy tomorrow. Safe travels. Enjoy all the pasta. Looking forward to catching up with you when you're back. Thank you, everyone.